All right. This is Dr. James Bunte, and I know James from my work at my completing my doctorate at CCM, University of Cincinnati, and I owe James a lot for you know helping me get through the whole thing while I was still working full time and everything else. And appreciate that, James. Why don't you tell people out there in YouTube land? Why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, first of all, that was a tremendous thing that you accomplished in 2 years to basically finish a doctorate while having a full-time job. I'll say, bravo again. That is not easy. It took me 7.5 years while I had a full-time job. So that's a good thing. Anyway, so I teach at the College Conservatory Music, and I actually started out teaching both jazz and classical saxophone, and directing some jazz chamber music, and teaching some large lecture classes. And now I'm the classical saxophone teacher at CCM, and also the head of Performance Studies division, which is like 60 people in my division, which is quite a quite a thing to corral all those people. But I think of myself as a musician first and foremost, and I like playing, and I'm very lucky that as a saxophonist I get to play different stuff all the time, whether it's playing with the Cincinnati Symphony, or recently with you with the Columbus Symphony, or doing a professional saxophone quartet that I tour with, or playing solo recitals. I love to be able to do different stuff all the time, different genres and different styles of music, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
So, um, I grew up in a suburb of Denver, Colorado, Lakewood, Colorado, and I will say that music was not a serious thing in my life growing up. I was much more serious about um, climbing in the mountains, and I was a BMX bike racer when I was in my tens and twelves, and I thought that was pretty awesome. I came to music kind of late, and I really didn't get serious about it. I was an electrical engineering major at University of Colorado at Boulder, and but all I was thinking about was, by that point in my life, was practicing and playing music. I really was not studying my differential equations.
That explains certain things to me. Uh,
The nerd side of me is very strong. So I have, but I'm a failed electrical engineer, so I make up for it by trying to figure other things out. But so I started being serious about music when I was, yeah, not until I was 19. I mean, really, I don't think I took it too seriously until that point. And anyway, uh, I love Colorado, but when I moved to Cincinnati, I was just shocked at the Midwest. I really had never been anywhere. Obviously, Colorado is just so different. It's so sports oriented and outdoor oriented, and this part of the country is so interesting because people are into culture and music and support live music. And when I moved to Cincinnati, I was very surprised for the size of the city. It's a fifth of the size of Denver, and there's 10 times the music going on here. And I know Columbus is the same. It's amazing.
yes, yes. I think the Midwest gets overlooked often for I think uh, the prominence of the arts.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, so many terrific musicians, artists come from the Midwest, and so many live in the Midwest. I mean, the cost of living is low, and these days you have the internet, so it's not necessary to move to New York or to move to L.A. or something. It's possible to be able to do everything that you need to do right from the Midwest. So I think it's, and because of that, I think it's even becoming more popular place, for great musicians to live. So why did you decide to become a musician? You kind of said it a little bit, but what about music is appealing to you?
Well, yeah, I will say that it has evolved over time, but the truth of the matter is that when I was in high school, um, especially, all my friends were musicians. All of my entire peer group that I consider my closest friends were all musicians, and of course that's centered around marching band and jazz band. But people weren't really practicing in hardcore into their own music. But it was very interesting. So it really is my people, and there was just something about it that was very interesting. So I went to Colorado, University of Colorado, and boy, when I was in the engineering world, even for that 1 year, I realized that that's just not me. Those people, they're just it's amazing. They Some of the smartest people in the world, passionate about what they do, and I just realized that wasn't going to be me. And my passion, was in music, and it took doing something else for me to realize how important that was. It was quite an uphill battle later on to catch up, to play the catch up game, and that's where my entire focus has changed, and now I just truly enjoy playing music. Of any type, by myself, with groups. We have this hiatus, and I do miss playing with other people, but I'm also just grateful to have time with my instrument.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's for sure.
Now
Yeah.
music is this therapeutic thing for me to just do. It's wonderful. I wake up every day wanting to play.
All right, so you kind of said a little bit about liking to do different kinds of music, different genres. Um, I'm similar that way. What are some projects that you've worked on or bands that you've played with, and which were your favorite and why?
Well, I will say that I've been lucky. I've been able to create a couple projects which have been fantastic. I played for 10 years with a classical saxophone quartet called Oasis Quartet, and we got to tour the world and play um, concertos with major symphonies, and we recorded a CD, and it's been very interesting. 6 years ago, we recorded a second CD with saxophone quartet and 6 percussionists and piano, and we commissioned new works, and we did a reimagining of this very famous work, The Carnival of the Animals by Saint-Saëns, and um, I can go into the details of the project, but I will say that was one of the when looking back, it was one of the most intense, fun experiences of my life. We got to play in Taiwan, and going to the concert. We got to we were it was almost like being a famous musician. We got to go to the concert with a police escort, and we got to go to the big concert hall in Taipei. It was truly wonderful. Um, I will say that was one of my most famous or my most enjoyable groups to play with. Um, and recently, I'm doing another project which is a very different. It's a saxophone quartet that we're playing third stream music. We're playing. We've
Oh
commissioned
yeah.
our own stuff, and I'm playing with people who are playing with jazz sensibilities, but we're all playing. We're playing jazz setups, and we're playing modern contemporary music instead of playing.
Hmm.
There isn't a lot of it that swings. It's more like improvisation in contemporary music with the sensibilities of all four of us being jazz musicians. So and that's with Rick Van Meter and Peter Summer and Jim Romaine. It's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun.
So you seem to have a really great experience with Oasis. My next question was actually about what your most touching or amazing moment, as a musician. Were there others? I'm sure there were.
I will say that for me, I can remember two things that were truly amazing. One was I was lucky enough to be able to do a Carnegie Hall debut as a classical
Oh yeah, yeah.
in in um, in 2007, so many years ago, um, and being on that famous stage um, as a classical music, there's something there was some special thing. I'll never forget that experience for the rest of my life. And my entire family came out, and it was man, that was pretty special. And then getting to play a concerto with Des Moines Symphony with Oasis, and getting to do an encore with an orchestra was
Wow.
it was truly astounding. That was very special. So I think those two things were my favorites.
And you're probably like me in that you're influenced and inspired by musicians that you play with.
Oh yeah.
But in addition to that, uh, who are some musicians that have been particularly inspirational to you in your work?
Hmm. Well, this sounds very corny, but um, when when I when I when I became a musician, that was when I found out that my dad was a musician. This is a crazy story, but he was like a uh, Colorado um, bar playing steel guitar player. It's a crazy thing, and he gave it up when he and my mom decided to have children. He became an insurance salesman, built his own business from nothing,
Mm.
but literally did not play music until he retired. He pulled out his steel guitar, formed a band, and did like the retirement home circuit. And he played everything by ear. He didn't read a note of music. But when I got into music, and he told me that he did this, and he cut a record when he was 20 years old on steel guitar, I was like, what in the world? So that was inspiring that he brought that back out. I think that was very special. Um, I, on my instrument, I have it was very interesting when I was in Colorado. Tom Meyer, my teacher, used to just tell me to bring in blank cassettes into the lesson while he was teaching me how to play classical saxophone. He'd be dubbing me off um, jazz CDs that he had, and so he would just say, "Yeah, you've never heard of this guy. You need to check him out." And that's when I literally got into John Coltrane and Michael Brecker and Jared Verganzi and all these people, this amazing, the world, Charlie Parker, and he would just, and then that's all I would listen to. So I was inspired. I was inspired by Tom inspiring me by giving me all those things. So I try to I try to do the same kind of thing with my students. Let's see who else. I I have to say the I've been just very lucky. Both of my teachers are just been very versatile musicians who just want to play everything. So it really it allowed me to accept that we don't have to be um, the most. I mean, we just don't have to focus our whole life on one tiny point, and
Yeah.
we can. So I was lucky. My teachers were inspirational in that way. I don't know how did you get into so many different genres of music?
Yeah. Well, I'm bored easily. Um, that, so there's, uh, and I've thought about this quite a bit because it's possible that being bored easily could be a sign of a lack of focus or an inability to focus. And so that's been something that has been, it's been a theme and something that I've uh, tried to balance and try to make sure that I'm not just scatterbrained and just doing all kind of stuff because, I can't stand doing one thing, and if there was just that one thing, would I be able to handle that, um, but my dad was a great saxophone player, and I wanted to do what he did, You know, I started really young, probably too young. My orthodontist will tell you that. Um, but I started when I was 6, and he tells me that I was begging to play for like a solid like 3 years before he would even start teaching me. He
Wow.
wanted to know that I was serious about it. Um, and But it was all I wanted to do, and I was just totally possessed by it, and it's totally not normal, and you know, I can't take any credit for it or anything. It's just like a weird thing.
Yeah.
But you know, by the time I was 10, I started playing flute, and then 16 clarinet, and then all along I'd been composing and arranging music and recording projects and stuff. Um, and it's just it seems like a natural growth, like out of, I think, starting as young as I did is just wanting to have another place that I can go to.
Yeah, that's great.
And so playing other instruments, and like, I didn't start playing bass until after I took the job at Ohio State.
Really?
Um, and then guitar I've been playing for about 6 years, 5 or 6 years, and keyboard I didn't get really serious about, like getting some really functional good keyboard chops together until after I finished my master's degree.
Wow.
Um, and then, you know, the writing and arranging and stuff has always been, you know, I tell my students this all the time. Um, if you really honestly can be bored in music, something is wrong with you. I'm sorry, something is wrong. You're not. There are so many avenues to go down, and I mean, in your case, for instance, you know, I want you to talk a little bit about your mouthpieces.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, there are so many avenues to go down with music, even if it's sitting behind a mixing board, being the audio engineer, producing music, all the different styles of music, all the different instruments. If you get bored, learn another instrument. You know, if you're getting bored, learn to write for a different, you know, kind of ensemble. You know, I didn't write for voice very often, and then I ended up writing a lot for voice. You know, and now I write quite a bit for voice, and I'm a minister of music at a church, and so having those skills has been important. All the stuff that I know how to do is stuff that's very utilitarian. You know, it's, you know, do you want to work? Yeah, I want to work. Well, you're going to have to know how to do this, this, and this if you want to work. So I said, okay, well, I guess that's what I have to learn how to do then.
Right.
You know.
But and to segue into my work on mouthpieces, I'll say that's what a lot of this was about. I was unhappy all the time with the way my equipment was playing.
Hmm.
I asked my teachers, well, why doesn't this just work better? And I would be so, you know, you just need to keep searching for that, whatever the perfect mouthpiece is.
Right.
And which is, you know, that's a lot of people spend tens of years doing. And so I
Yes.
started to seek out people who worked on them to say, well, maybe I can figure out what makes them tick, and I could
Right.
myself. So I ruined a lot of mouthpieces that way. But I found a guy who was willing to teach me, a guy, Eric Greifenhagen, who is famous for being the person behind Morgan mouthpieces now, and he was just very generous with his time, and I paid him for a bunch of lessons, but he taught me a bunch of stuff for free too. And I would bring him mouthpieces that were messed up, and he would tell me why, what I did wrong. Here's how you fix those things. And over time, I figured it out. I figured out many things. So I'm very proud that I have. Hold on, do I have one here? I do have. So I have a classical mouthpiece that I'm making, which this isn't. It's called the Lyric, which It's a collaboration between me and the owner of Sax Quest mouthpieces, and we also make jazz mouthpieces. Here's an example called the Core, and this is
Okay. Yeah.
the Core has been very widely reviewed now. It's gotten some pretty good reviews. So I'm very proud of that collaboration between sax quest myself, but at heart, I'm still searching for how to make things easier for me and you and the musicians that we work with. So I don't get frustrated like the other. There are people who are searching for equipment and they're never happy. For me now, it's kind of just fun to try different things and mess with stuff, and as opposed to searching, being unhappy all the time. I'm happy. I can play almost anything, and it's fine, and I can make something work. And if I can't make it work, I'm gonna fix it until I can make it work, and then but I don't have to be unhappy all the time about equipment. So I think that's a big trap. You don't want to go down the path of being unhappy with your equipment all the time.
Something we haven't talked about very much is, I mean, you know, you talked in the very beginning, is you're a teacher,
Yeah.
and you're a terrific teacher.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and what about teaching makes you tick? Because you're very good, you're very thorough, you have a lot of you have a lot of inside baseball
Wow.
going on, in the way that you teach, in the sort of nuance and the subtlety that you can get at stuff. Um, what about teaching makes you tick, and who has been influential as far as your teaching goes?
Um, well, it's really interesting because I continue to think that I get better as a teacher every year. I continue to learn more, just like we all do as musicians. But I still think there's a ton for me to learn and get better. What's inspirational to me right now is the energy with which my students bring, their own life and to music. I think that's great. Inspiration as a teacher, I will say that again, I was very lucky. I had two teachers who were willing and able to explain things to me in ways that can actually help. So much of the world, it seems to me, my wife is a flutist, and we talk about this all the time. So many flute teachers say things like, well, you just need to think blue. Well, okay, it doesn't actually help anyone play better. And I've seen it in the saxophone world a little bit too, not as much, but so I was inspired to be the kind of teacher who says, okay, I hear this. I think you want to be able to accomplish this. Here's 3 or 4 ways that you can try to get yourself to be able to do this. Now, if the student can't do it in those 3 or 4 ways, that's where the deep game goes, and you have to start pulling out your bag of tricks, and you just have to you have to be creative and try problem solve and try to come up with something that will help that student make the connection, because we all learn differently. Some of us are kinesthetic learners and oral learners and visual learners, and we have to get in the minds of our students and try to figure out what key is going to unlock their potential. So I think my best strength as a teacher is not my depth of knowledge, it's my willingness to adapt and try to figure out what's going to help the student. Yeah, so that's what makes me tick. I will say, when I go to other saxophone master classes or master classes on other instruments, without a doubt, I sit there and say, why don't I teach that? Every time I'm trying to steal something, I'm transcribing something someone's saying, I'm like, that is a great idea, So I think all of us have something great to say, and I'm sure you have a ton. I want to observe you teach someday. I think everyone's got their own take on it, and what we need to do is, try to amalgamate the best we can.
Yes, I have to say, because when I came to you, I hadn't played a lick of classical saxophone for 14 years or something.
Right.
And it's not because, classical and jazz were together from the beginning. When I started, I played I played by ear. I played off the page. I played classical rep. I played jazz rep. I did all of the, I did these things because my dad was insistent. I had a lesson every day.
Wow.
And he was insistent that I work on skills because he believed that if you can excel as a classical player and as a jazz player, then there's nothing that you can't play.
Oh.
And so that was what it was. And so all the way through high school and all the way, till I finished my master's degree, a lot of classical saxophone. But honestly, the classical saxophone was all in an academic setting.
Sure.
And my jazz career had been developing since I was in high school.
Sure.
And so that just made more sense for me to go that way. And, this tends to be more work on the commercial side of the horn. And so I tended to go that direction. And it wasn't because I didn't love classical music. It was because, that's just not the way that my career went. And you got to pay the bills,
Of course.
And but I was really hungry to get back to it. And yeah, your attention to detail and really helping me to get my embouchure back together, and produce that classical project that I recently released. That was all you. So I really appreciate the help and the flexibility and the nuance, the detail. I mean, it's like you understood how to get to it quickly. It didn't take a long time before this stuff started really affecting my playing. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, it was fun working with you, man. It's fun to work with great musicians who just, need to work on a specific thing. It's a lot harder to work with people who sound good but aren't fantastic musicians. So it was fun working with you. It was fun.
Yes, and I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about being able to practice more now. So I'm going to ask you a question that's going to be kind of in two parts. I'm going to preempt that with a little commentary about. So I've heard a lot of different things from a lot of different artists about practicing.
Sure.
I've heard anywhere from, well, I don't practice, to I love to practice. I love to practice all the time. That's all I want to do is practice, to suggesting real specific things to practice that are probably things that they haven't practiced for 20 years, fundamental stuff, stuff like, always practice with a metronome, things that are almost can almost be insulting.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I can play. So when I ask somebody about what it is that they're doing, it's not because I either don't already understand a lot about what it is already, or couldn't just figure it out. Sometimes you're it's a courtesy. You ask people, hey man, that's pretty cool. Like what is that? Yeah, I want to know what it is. I'd like a quicker path towards that. But really, it's kind of like, it's an attaboy. It's like, hey man, that's really killing. It's so killing that I'm going to ask you what it is.
Sure.
Now, what is that? And what did you practice, by the way, to be able to do that?
Sure.
And in my own life, obviously my practicing has transformed, and it's completely and totally different now than it was when I was a kid, obviously, or when I was in college, or when I had a lot more time to practice.
Right.
It was different. So I'm just curious, what are the kinds of things that you practice now? And when you didn't have as much time, like 4 weeks ago, what did you practice since there was not very much time? since you have 2 kids and a wife, it's, and are overseeing 60 faculty members and all of that. So what are the kinds of things that you would practice to try to not just maintain, but try to get a little bit more, you know?
So, well, okay, so I'll answer the 4 weeks ago question first.
Okay, yeah.
So, like you, I've become a completely different kind of practicer than I was 10 years ago, pre-kids, BK as we call it, before kids. Everyone is different. I get it. I've been around musicians that don't need to warm up, and they pull the horn out of the case, and they're playing at full speed, and they sound clean and perfect and amazing. And I just am not that person. I need some maintenance. I equate it to, there are certain athletes that can just get out of bed and go run a marathon. I don't know. I'm not that person. I need warm up time. So I have some maintenance. I have my stretching and push-ups and sit-ups routine that I do for saxophone. I practice, as cheesy as it sounds, man, I practice, the first thing I do is put on the metronome and I play something, and it doesn't have to be major scales, but it needs to be steady time, so my fingers and my embouchure and my air starts to work together, and I remember how to play saxophone. I need 10 or 15 minutes of something with a metronome, doing that kind of stuff. And then I became super efficient this last couple years. Man, this is crazy to say, but I would give recitals every year. I would play with a quartet, play with an orchestra, whatever, on an hour a day. I just lived on an hour a day. And it was often 10 to 11 at night after the kids are down.
Yep.
And so after my 15-minute warm-up routine, I was trying to push myself, like you're saying, how do I not just maintain, but how do I get myself to another level? So what I had to do was I had to pick pieces of music that were going to push me in a certain way. So that I'm using music, whether that's the faculty jazz tet would invite me to play, so I would pick some tunes I didn't know to play on, so that it forced me to memorize some new stuff. And then I would play some classical repertoire that I'm working on a flute sonata now from the classical period, because I've never played anything from the time of Mozart. I've never played anything. And as a saxophonist, we obviously didn't have our instrument at that point. So we missed out this entire genre of music. So I'm pushing myself to understand the subtleties of classical period stuff through the Debian sonata, which is a lot of fun, by the way.
And so the now question, that was the 4 weeks ago. So the now question, now that you have more time to practice, and I get the sense, that maybe a lot of your answer's the same. You're still picking pieces of music that are challenging you, but do you have any special sauce?
So the special sauce for me has become this thing that I'm telling my students. Hopefully I said this to you but I am becoming, I swear I paid lip service to this 5 or 10 years ago, and I was one of those guys who was saying it and I was not doing it. But now I am much more mindful when I'm practicing. I'm mindful about not just, does this sound like the right note at the right time? What I'm being mindful of is how does it feel? How is this as effortless as I can play? Am I really being efficient in my practice, and how am I really developing musicality later? And then I've been recording myself a lot more, and this is the thing I was paying lip service to. I swear I was telling my students to record yourself, and now that I've been sequestered in my house with a great setup that I can record myself whenever I want. And at school I put a nice thing together so I could record myself there. Man, I learned so much and hate my playing so much every time. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's great. appreciate you're a real honest guy.
Well,
It's not everybody that's willing to. I always felt like I could ask you questions and you weren't going to hide anything from me.
well, there's no point. Why would we want to hide things from people?
Well, I'm telling you, there's a lot of teachers that they have. This is my curriculum. This is the stuff that I'm going to teach you, and then this is my secret stuff back here that makes me me,
Right.
and I don't want anybody getting anywhere close to that stuff.
Oh my God.
And what's interesting about that, to me, is that in my experience, the real thing that makes someone sound elite is all of that work that they put in.
Yeah, right.
And so I could show you everything that I know. I can show my students everything that I know, and a very small percentage of them are going to be willing to do the work anyway. So it's like hidden in plain view anyway. So, and then the other thing is, there's that whole principle of the vacuum. If you won't let anything out, you can't get anything in.
Right.
You got to be willing to, and I'm not, I don't subscribe to karma or something, but I do believe that there is a sense of like a circuit. The air has to move.
Oh yeah, man.
You got to, and even if it's just about the way that you express what it is that you're showing someone, that you're sharing with someone, it helps you to learn about it better and makes you better at what it is that you can describe better.
Oh yeah.
One of those things that you were saying about being mindful, like really focusing on how you feel when you're playing and being relaxed and making sure you're thinking about everything that's happening. It's interesting because that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because we learn how to go on autopilot, and then it's almost like at least part of me doesn't want to have to go back to when I was having to think about all of this stuff.
Right.
I just want that just to happen so I can just think about the music. But we all need a reset at some point, and there's no way to get there unless you are really focusing and paying attention to what's actually happening.
Well, I think what you said is interesting. I think there's a misperception that if you're actually having a cognitive process about what's going on, that you haven't gotten to a certain level, because we all know that feeling of like I wasn't even in the room, that there was music happening and it was just going through me. Like we have all had concerts like that where
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I think that on a day-to-day basis, it's so much better for us to be actually in our bodies thinking about it.
Oh yeah.
Because for two reasons. First of all, it is a type of meditation. Like we are actually just, this is the thing that we do. And my God, if you're the opposite of mindful is mindless. So let's not. I mean, is perhaps the worst kind. We've all heard our students just ripping through stuff, and I mean ripping like paper ripping. No, ripping,
right.
ripping through things that are seemingly fast or whatever, but there's a lot of problems in there, and they're just not, dissecting and being aware. And I don't know. I don't want to do that. I'm too old. I only have. This is the realization of being in your late 40s. I'm almost 50. Is I have X number of concerts left, whatever that number is. I have X number of concerts left, faculty recitals or guest concerts or whatever it is. And what I think about is I want to play the best music I can in that time. I don't have unlimited time, so I think it's interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I heard a comedian say he went in it with his audience, and I think it's Dion Cole.
Oh.
And he was like, okay, you're in your 30s, that means you have 40 more summers, or whatever. He's just coming, and then he says, oh, you in your 40s? Okay, it means you got 30 more summers. And he kept going, you in your 50s? You got 20 more summers. Starting to get real now, huh? But yeah, I think having a healthy realization about what our mortality is, I mean, no one is going to do the stuff that we want to accomplish but us.
Right.
And you can either use the time that you have to move towards that, or you can just hang out and just let everything pass you. I hear this thing all the time, or it's a sentiment that I perceive. It's a sentiment that I perceive, even if it's not literally being spoken.
Sure.
And that is the idea that waiting for my life to begin.
Oh yeah.
That's like, wake up. This is your life. So you can either be driving it, or you can let it run over you. I mean, you don't really have many choices with that. I mean, so I just had a couple more things. So, in speaking of goals and unfinished projects and personal growth, those kind of things, what are some ways that you're trying to improve, that you want to improve? Doesn't have to just be music. And what are maybe some goals that you have? Maybe some things that you're like, hey, in 5 years I want to be able to do this, or whatever.
Okay. There's a couple nerd things that my brain went to immediately. One of them is that I would love to. What I'm going to work on is not a mass-produced mouthpiece. I'm going to work on a boutique mouthpiece, and I'm just gonna go around to the best players who I can find and try to make them happy with whatever mouthpiece it is, because I don't want to have the next mass-produced whatever. It's unlikely anyway, and even if it was, there's just so many problems. I don't want to get into that. I'm much more interested in creating mouthpieces for musicians, serious musicians. So that's on my bucket list. I have done a little bit of that. I've gotten a few really great players on this lyric, and I'm happy about that, and I'm going to continue to work on that. As far as my playing, it's I have what I really want to do is I really want to be able to play. I really want to play some of the repertoire that I thought 5 years ago was too hard, and I didn't want to tackle it. So now I flip things around, because there is music that my students are playing that I don't, frankly, have 3.5 hours a day to decipher and do. And I'm going to do some of that, but I'm gonna have to be smart. I'm gonna have to do one of those a year or something, and spend 6 months instead of a month. But I'm gonna play some music that I thought might have been out of reach. And I'm going to try to play. I've had such fun playing soprano. I got to play a concerto with the wind orchestra at CCM. I got to play the John Mackey concerto, and so I think I want to dedicate more time to soprano saxophone. I've always been a classical alto jazz tenor guy. That's what I've just kind of done, and I think I'm really interested in soprano for the next little bit.
All right, and is there anything else? Is there anything else that you'd like to mention?
Well, let me just say, this has been because I know you're a fitness guy. So what I said this spring was that this was going to be the spring, because I always go to the gym. I go to the gym maybe two days a week. I've always just been on kind of a maintenance thing, and I'm not terribly out of shape. I'm not in shape. I'm just like, I can function. But I really wanted to go to the gym more, and I was getting to the gym 3 days a week, and maybe even 4, and then they close everything. So I'm going to have to figure something out. So my new goal is once the world reopens, I'm going to figure some things out about my own training. Yeah. Yeah, I do have a CD to pump. I remember now that I was going to get it out. 1 second.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm really proud of this project. I don't know if I gave you one of these, but this is my trio CD with my friend Nathan Nab and Hyunjio. And so this music is amazing stuff, and it's available on CD Baby and stuff. I'll send you one, Shawn.
That'll be great. And let me I will on the screen here I'll put your website and
sure.
social media and all of that. You wanna say what your website is?
My website is www.jamesbunte.com, Bunte. I do. This is one of the things that my generation. I'm not as good at this as you are. I need a YouTube page and start getting followers and stuff. I really have not done that.
But you are on Facebook, though.
I do the Facebook thing. So I post videos and stuff, and there is some stuff on my website.
Great. Well, Dr. Bunte, I so appreciate your time and willingness to do this interview, and I had a great time. Hopefully you did too.
I did, Dr. Thunder. It's fun to. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and congratulations on all you're doing.
All right.